chapter 6. This chapter deals with composition of substances and solutions, and we're going to learn how the units of measurement that we use for concentrations, etc., for solutions, and how to manipulate those. First, a little bit of review. We have learned up to now how to calculate formula mass, or the molar mass. You'll find that sometimes molar mass, molecular weight, they're all equivalent of a substance. Once we know what the actual written out formula is for a compound, we can calculate the mass of it from the periodic table. We'll learn how to do that. We've also learned how to figure out moles if we're given grams, or grams if we're given moles, by using this particular unit here, so the formula mass, as a conversion factor. We will always use the molecular mass or the formula mass to relate the mass of a compound to moles of that same compound. Learn how to do this well, because we will be using this throughout the semester. It is a very important thing to do in chemistry. So learn how to calculate the formula mass, review it if you're not quite sure, and learn how to use the formula mass as a conversion factor to relate mass to moles of that same compound. I have worked out a few problems for you on how to do what I just mentioned. Sodium sulfate. Also practice how to write chemical formulas when you're given the names of the formulas. I've shown you how to do this example and several other examples. So here once again we need to write the formula for each and determine the molar mass for each compound. I have worked these out for you, so click on the video. Try them on your own first, and then watch the videos and see if what you did will match what I have on the videos. Just so you have, once again, you have a little bit of a review on how to do these, but especially how to write the formula once you're given the name. A lot of students struggle with that. And then here, for this set of problems, you need to figure out how many moles of each are present. I once again have made a video of how to solve these, but try them on your own first. Write the formula for aluminum chloride, find its molecular mass, molar mass, and then convert that amount of grams of aluminum chloride into moles of aluminum chloride. Do the same thing with sodium acetate. And then in the next slide here, we're asked to figure out the mass for each of these amounts of moles. Once again, I've made the video, but try these on your own first and then see if what you get, your answer will match the video. The procedure is very similar here. You write the formula from the name and then figure out its molecular mass of each compound, and then use that as your conversion factor to convert the moles of this substance to grams of this substance. This is just sort of as a review of what we've done before. Now let's talk about solutions. Solutions are anything that have several components, really, but the simplest solutions will have two components. One is the solute and one is the solvent. So solutions have solutes that are dissolved in a solvent. The solvent is doing the dissolving. The solute is being dissolved. The solute is in a smaller quantity than the solvent. The solvent will be the larger quantity. The solute will be the smaller quantity. Now, solutions can be of many different kinds. We are so used to thinking, when we hear the word solution, we're used to thinking of liquid solutions, whether they're with water or anything else, but we think of liquids. And that is not necessarily true. We can have solutions that are made of gases. Air, for example, that we breathe in is it's a solution of gases because it's made of different components, with the largest being nitrogen. It's got the largest percentage. And then you have other like oxygen and helium and other gases, water vapor. You can also have a solution of solids. Once again, the word solution in our mind doesn't lend the idea of, of a solution by uh, solids. We think of it as liquids all the time. But there is such a thing as a solution made up of two solids. For example, when we talk about brass, that is a solution or an alloy that is made or mixture. A solution is nothing else than a mixture of two or more components where one is the largest component and the others are in a smaller percentage. But um, brass is basically a mixture of two solid elements, and they are so well mixed together that we can't tell them apart. Those are homogeneous solutions. And solutions where we can see the pieces, the components, and we can tell the components from each other in the macroscopic sense, then these are actually heterogeneous solutions. We've mentioned a little bit of these, well, mixtures when we talked in chapter 1 when we talked about classification of matter. So solutions are nothing else than mixtures. Really, it's a little fancier term than a mixture. And just remember that solutions are made of solutes that are dissolved in a solvent. These are your three words, three definitions that you should know. A solution is a mixture, the solute is being dissolved, and the solvent is dissolving the solute. We use different units to determine concentrations. How much of a solute do we have dissolved? That is typically what we're interested we're interested in looking at how much of this solute we have dissolved in the solvent or the solution, and we use several different types of units. The first one that is widely used in chemistry is called the molarity. Remember this, molarity is denoted with a big M, and the definition of molarity is moles of solute divided by or per liters of solution, total liters of solution, not just liters of solvent, but the liters of solution. Molarity, then, big M, is given as moles of solute. How many moles of what is being dissolved do we have per liters of solution? Now, as I said, this is widely used in chemistry, especially for experiments where we don't need to change the temperature at all. However, if we do, then this can become a little problematic because it is temperature dependent. Here we have a couple of very simple examples on how to calculate molarity, and I have a video here that shows you how to do these types of problems. But remember, the definition of molarity is moles of solute over liters of solution. So you need an amount in moles divided by a volume of solution. Okay. So remember this, molarity is moles of solute divided by liters of solution. And therefore you have to know the moles, or you have to know the liters to figure out the molarity. Or if you're given the molarity and you're given the liters, you can calculate the moles, or vice versa. So depending on what you're given, typically you'll be given 2 out of the 3, and you can calculate the third variable that you don't know. Watch the video, and if you have questions, these are the simplest kinds of problems you can find with molarity. But if you have issues with them, please reach out to me and ask. These set of problems here are a little harder than the previous slide. These are also molarity problems. Watch these and actually attempt to do them on your own first. And if you have done it, watch the video and see whether your answer will match the video. But for the first one here, it asks you for the mass of the solute. The mass of the solute that is dissolved in this much solution of this molarity. So you are now given the molarity and the liters. From these two, you could calculate the moles of solute, and from the moles, you can calculate the mass. Because you know the formula, you can calculate the molecular formula or the formula mass, which we talked about in the first slide. And then you can convert from moles into grams. This is the same idea. It asks you to calculate number of moles and the mass of the solute. It gives you the volume and the molarity, so you can calculate moles. And then once you have moles, you can figure out the mass by using the molar mass of this particular compound. Here it asks you for the molarity if you have the volume and the mass of HCl. Now, note, molarity is given as moles, not mass in grams, but moles of solute over liters, and therefore you need to convert this to moles first by using the molar mass of HCl. We're kind of going backwards from these two problems. So you figure out the moles, then you divide it by the volume. However, make sure that this volume is in the correct unit. The unit has to be liters, and this is in milliliters. So convert this to liters first, and then moles over liter gives you molarity. Try them first on your own, and then watch the videos. Now, a special case of molarity or figuring out molarity is the dilution problem. Sometimes, especially in laboratories in chemistry, we don't want to make solutions all the time. So it's easier for us to make one what we call a stock solution. There's a very concentrated solution, and then we can take small amounts of that and dilute it to the correct amount, the correct concentration. It's just easier for us to make one big pile of stock solution, and then we can just take little bits of it and dilute it to the correct amount. We are all familiar with the word dilution, where we take something that is more concentrated and we dilute it, we make it less concentrated. Now what connects these, so this is the formula we're going to be using for the dilution problems, where C stands for concentration and V stands for volume. In some textbooks, you'll find M for molarity, so M1 molarity, M2 molarity. It's the same thing. So C concentration is expressed in molarity, so you can have C or M here. What this means is that the initial set of conditions have to equal the second set of conditions. So concentration and volume vary inversely with each other. So if I increase the concentration, the volume will decrease. If I have this first set of conditions, so I have a particular concentration and a particular volume in liters or milliliters of that solution, and I increase the volume, so I add more water, let's say, or I increase the volume of that solution, well, now my concentration is not going to be the same, because remember what the concentration is. It's moles dissolved over liters of solution. So if I change my volume, then that changes my concentration too. And because my number on top hasn't changed, moles hasn't changed, when I increase the volume, that decreases the concentration, because concentration, C, or molarity, is given as moles on top over liters of solution at the bottom. So if I increase my denominator but don't change my numerator, then this fraction gets smaller. These, once again, remember that these are inversely related to each other. So if I decrease the volume, the concentration is going to increase, and vice versa. The hardest thing for students is to determine which concentration goes with what volume. It takes a little bit of practice. Do these problems on your own, like I said, and then I've made videos on how to do these too, but try them on your own, see if you'll get an answer and see if you match the answers that I have. Um, you will have, typically for these types of problems, you'll have 3 out of 4 variables given to you, and then you will solve for the fourth one. As I said, the trick is to determine which concentration and volume go together and which concentration and which set of conditions go together. It just takes a little bit of practice, so work these, and if you need more practice, you can work. There are problems at the back of your chapter that you can work. Another unit of concentration that we're going to talk about is the mass percentage, and this is given as the mass of a component. Typically we're going to talk about the mass of the solute, but you can do mass of solvent too. But we're going to talk about mass of solute over the mass of solution, total mass of solution, times 100%, or 100 to give me a percentage. This we use because mass is independent of temperature, of other factors like temperature, whereas volume is. And remember that I talked about molarity being widely used, but only if we're not looking at changing the temperature. If we change the temperature, we cannot use molarity anymore because volume is dependent on temperature, whereas mass isn't. And because mass isn't, when temperature is a factor, then we can use a mass percentage as a concentration instead of molarity. I have a bunch of problems here worked out with mass percentage. These two have this video, these two have this video, and this is a little harder than the rest, so they kind of start increasing in a little bit in difficulty. But I have worked all these out for you, and I want you to watch the videos and work the problems in your worksheets. And once again, if you have any issues, let me know. And then the last part that we're going to talk about is the volume percentage, which is exactly like the mass percentage, but it deals with volume instead of the mass, where we have the volume of the component, and typically, like I said, we're going to talk about the volume of the solute, but you can do volume of the solvent. We're going to talk about the volume of the solute over total volume of solution times 100. Now, with the mass percentage, the mass of solution can be additive. So if you're given the mass of each component, say the mass of the solute and the mass of the solvent, but not the mass of solution, you could add those two values together, the mass of solute and the mass of solution or solvent, to give you the total mass of solution. For volume percentage, you cannot do that. You cannot add the volumes of the solute and the solvent together to give you the volume of solution because volumes are not additive like mass is. And therefore, volume of solution would have to be given to you. And you cannot just add the two components together to get the total volume of solution. But remember, the formula for the volume percentage is very similar to the mass percentage. The only difference is that the volumes of each component cannot add up to give you the total volume of solution, whereas for the mass, you can do that because mass is additive. We use volume percentage because we do this very easily with the common lab equipment that we have, and that's why we can use volume percentage. And a lot of times it is used when we mix two liquids together. It's very easy to do. Instead of finding the mass of the liquids, we can just look at the volume. We have graduated cylinders that we use, and it's just very easy to do, especially when you deal with liquids. The mass to volume percentage, which is very similar to the mass to mass or volume to volume percentage. The only difference is that you are doing the mass of solute divided by the total volume of the solution. So you have a mass on top and a volume at the bottom, but it's a percentage just like the other two. This is used quite a bit in the medical field. So for those of you who are going to go into nursing, you're going to be running into this particular concentration unit where you have the mass of the solute on top and the total volume of solution at the bottom. The blood sugar, for example, where you'll have the mass of the sugar, which is your solute on the top, divided by the liters of blood. Okay, that would be the mass to volume percentage. So it's an important unit, but it's mostly used in medical fields, not necessarily in just chemistry. And then lastly, this is the last set of problems that we're going to be looking at in this chapter. This is a percent by volume problem, so there's two problems here. I have made a video for these, but try them on your own first. Read the book and try to understand how this is, I think, a little bit easier chapter because you can memorize the formulas, you can learn the formulas, and then apply those. Depending on what you're given, you can figure out what is missing. They can become a little more difficult because we may combine other pieces of things that we've learned from prior chapters, but it would not necessarily be anything new. It's just you have to learn how to combine what you already know with what we're learning in this chapter. If you want more practice, as I said, look at the back of your chapter or do the worksheet problems. There's tons of these problems there. And if you have any questions at all, please ask. This concludes the lecture on Chapter 6.